Hey, well, Farmer Jesse here, welcoming you back to another really exciting season of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. As I mentioned at the end of last season and in the intro to host Mimi Castile last week, I'm not hosting this season, but rather playing more of a producer role. The hosting, well, that is being done by some really awesome other people. So I am excited to introduce the second of those hosts of season 5, Alex Ball of Old City Acres in Michigan. I'm a big fan of Alex's work, and in this mini interview, we get a brief rundown of his operation, and we sort of just muse on the evolution of our farms. Alex is going to bring a lot to the hosting seat, and he has a particular interest in the details surrounding what it takes to run a successful farm business, which was something my interview questions and approach honestly kind of lacked. So that will be amazing. And I love this particular chat that I got to have with Alex, who is just one of those people you feel like you can talk to and listen to for hours. Super fun. Alex's first interview will be up on Monday, officially kicking off his contributions to season 5, and it's going to be awesome. As always, though, of course, we have some amazing sponsors this year. Our work is primarily powered by the good folks over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. So if you appreciate this or anything else that we do, consider signing up to be a patron at patreon.com/no-till-growers. You can likewise support our work by picking up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook from no-till-growers.com. And surprise, hats are on pre-order now for Patreon members. They should be shipping in the next couple weeks, and they will be available to everyone else on Monday when Alex's episode goes up. That is at no-till-growers.com. The no-till hats, indeed, back. Otherwise, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you are getting it. And while we wait for Alex's first interview, please enjoy this mini interview I did with Alex Ball, the second of our amazing new hosts of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. Alex Ball, welcome to the hosting seat. I'm super excited to have you join the team.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Jesse. It's funny, if you remember when you called to ask me to be a part of this, I was on my very first rotation of 10 years, and I was about to literally get on the flight, and I had a call from you. I'm like, oh, Jesse maybe wants to talk to me about, maybe be on the podcast for an episode or two. He's like, oh, Jesse, you want to be a host? It really caught me off guard as I was heading out of town. But now I'm super excited to be involved with this.
Yeah, that's so fun. I think it was the Winter Growers podcast the episode that you did with Clara about your farm, and it was just like, I don't know, I just was like, this is, I love what Alex has got going on, and I feel like he's super curious, and I just want to hear more. I want to hear more from him. So I thought putting you in the hosting seat would be super fun, and we could all learn with you. Basically, like I was hoping today, maybe we could have you just give us a little bit of background as to where you're located and maybe just some info about the farm that you run up there.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm located in Sumter, Michigan, which is on the very, very edge of Detroit. It's kind of a rural urban area that I list the farms in. So we've been here for about 5 years now, but the farm is about 10 years old. And we are a year-round flexible CSA farm. So that means that folks can choose exactly what they want week to week to week from our farm. We won't push anything. We don't force them to take any items they don't want. And our CSA goes year-round, 12 months of the year. And the cool kind of niche thing we do is that those credits or that CSA membership you purchase rolls from season to season to season. So we have members with us who have been with us 3 or 4 years who might buy only one membership, 2 memberships, but they just spend at their rate. So it really allows us to create a cool group of folks around us who aren't the traditional, let's say, CSA customers. So we really kind of covered a little niche out in our local area. And for folks who don't know, Southeast Michigan, it's a hyper-competitive ag area. Michigan is the second most agriculturally diverse state after California. So in our area, we have tons of truck farms, tons of apple farms, vegetable farms, greenhouses, nurseries. It's in a good way, saturated market to some extent. A lot of good competition here, a lot of good growers. So we really have to set ourselves apart to sell that local product.
Yeah, that's very cool. So you said 10 years, you've been doing the farm 10 years, but it's been at that location for 5?
Yeah. So I started when I was 18, I'm a first generation farmer, but it was literally in the backyard in my hometown. I found someone rent me a little backyard space. And I started with that. And we unfortunately lost our farmland every single year for 5 years in a row, for the first 5 years of the business.
Oh.
Yeah. And actually, the first one was to a gas pipeline. Then the third one was a pipeline as well, ironically.
Wow.
Yeah. And a few of them were just like, we had one group that one time I signed a lease with actually another farmer in the area to farm the property for like 5 years. And the first day of planting, I went out there to plant, and they confronted me and said, "Hey, actually, we're going to be moving the end of the season, so we want you to leave."
Oh no.
So so every year was kind of skating uphill trying to get something done. But at year 5, I told myself that, okay, I'm going to throw a Hail Mary. I'm going to try to find a piece of farmland. If I can't find a piece of farmland at the end of this season, then I'm going to stop farming and just go work for somebody else and then come back in a few years. That was kind of my plan. And I looked at over 100 properties that just drive from spot to spot to spot, looking at really fit my budget. Because at that time I was only like 21, 22, and so I didn't have a lot of money. Ended up finding this little piece of swampland for $15,000, and we've spent now over $100,000 developing it through digging over a mile of ditches. We have levees, which are just big mounds, floodwaters off the property. We have active drainage systems. Basically ran underground irrigation lines to all of our greenhouses. So we did all that the first few years. So now we're in year 5. Everything's kind of paid off, and the business is actually really thriving now that we've gotten past those really hard years. Yeah.
Those build-up years are tough, but that sounds like extra tough. Are you living on the property too?
Yeah. So I spend about half my time here. I built a tiny house on the property. So I spend about 3 days a week here, usually on Monday when I come in to get ready for the week, Thursday and Friday night to get ready for market and CSA and stuff like that. But then the other times I spend at my apartment up in town, which is where Ipsy is where I live and where I sell majority of my product. So I spend half the time there, half the time on the farm. So it's nice to be able to get away from home a little bit, but also it's really nice to get away from the farm when we all know there's parts of the season where there's so much work to be done, and it's almost makes me an anxious mess looking at it all the time. So it's nice to get away every once in a while, just escape it.
I get that. I somewhat envy it. Hannah and I have lived we've pretty much lived on our farm except for one property that we were on. I also relate a little bit too much maybe to having several different farms in those 5 years. But we, cause we did something similar. Living on your farm has its benefits and positives and negatives, if you will. But so one of the things that I'm kind of curious about is for me, when I got into doing the podcast originally, it was not just so I could share more information and dig up information and talk to fun farmers, but it was also potentially what I could learn myself, that I'd be able to use. Are there things that you're kind of hoping to learn over the course of your interviews?
Yeah. That's honestly really the reason why I'm doing this, because I just love talking. I love just listening to people hear stories. But the one thing I'm really interested in is how farms survive. How do we make this work? What little niche, what little thing are you doing at your farm that allows you to survive? Every time I talk to somebody, I always find it's a weird, cool little thing that they're doing just to make it. I'll give you an example. There's a farm that I'm going to be interviewing, and they own a special farm, and they just opened a handmade pasta shop / kind of farm store just recently. Super niche. It's something super interesting. It's almost so exciting to see how do you make these farms last 10, 20, 30 years, generational? How do you make it work? I want to just know that. I'm a first generation farmer and kind of started with nothing, and I see a lot of farmers do the same thing. I want to know how did you make it past year 5?
I know that's it. I feel like that's the big question, because a lot of us can get to that point, but getting beyond that is the key in keeping your interest and keeping your health and keeping your mental health and all of those things, past those building years and into some sort of sustainable level. But I'm right there with you. I have a lot of questions about that.
Yeah, and I think I know me personally, I think for a lot of farmers too, like finances or how we survive, how we make it, it's just so personal. It's hard, no one really wants to say, oh, I'm making $2 an hour or I'm making nothing.
Mm-hmm.
No one really wants to admit those kind of things. So I think one thing I'm going to be doing is this season, I'm going to be releasing all of my farm finances yearly to try and just be a little more transparent, not only for the podcast, but really for my own personal CSA members, but I don't think I can ask people to be honest with me, and I can't ask them super, serious questions or let's say personal questions if I'm myself not willing to be open with my farm, my finances. So that's one thing we're going to be doing is trying to be a little more open with ourselves so we can hopefully get some honesty or some truth to the reality of farming from the folks we're talking to.
I think that's great. I mean, that level of transparency, I've seen a few farms do that over the years, and I think the customers really appreciate that too, and sometimes even respond in a way that's like we need to be paying you more, or you all need to be paying yourselves more, because when you can see the whole budget breakdown. And Hannah and I've talked about doing that sort of thing too. And our problem is often that we're still figuring out our finances 6 months later. And that's always something that we need to be working on. So it's a little bit less that we don't want to share as much as that if we shared it, it wouldn't make any sense. But I love that. I mean, I think that also could in turn help yourself and other people if they were doing that same thing with that level of transparency to refine how they document those things and how they process them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of hard, especially I think in the building years, to say, what are your finances? Because when I was, 3 years into this farm business on this property, I was living on a tent on the land, donating plasma twice a week, working another job and farming just to build this up. Mm-hmm. to get to that spot. But now we're at a spot where we're being transparent with our numbers makes sense, where you can see growth, you can see trends. So I think now not only is it helpful for us, and not only is that data being collected for now that we're collecting that data a little tighter and business a little more successful, it actually makes more sense to study that. So I'm hoping that we can kind of show the journey for other folks as well. And also the reality of it, that even if you come out here, you work 100 hours a week, chances are you probably might be making half minimum wage if you're lucky.
Yeah, I think, highlighting some of those things, especially in the building years, is important because I think people often have a skewed perception of starting any business, but especially farming, of like how much you can make and how fast you can make it. And also the initial investment, the capital investment, is a lot more than I think people realize. And maybe that's from those sort of, articles or videos that are like start a farm on $500 or whatever. But I think part of that is just that we underestimate these things and the cost of starting a farm and what the cost of running and keeping a farm going is.
Yeah, I totally underestimated it. So when I bought my property, and it was forested raw land, and I used every cent I had to purchase it. So I got here and said, oh, cool, let's just start farming. Mm-hmm. Not understanding at that time, what really needed the cost to develop this piece of property. So beforehand, I did renting land. And the amount of money I needed quickly grew much further than I was even capable of even borrowing. But like many of us, I kind of got into the idea of, oh yes, I can make, $1,000 per bed of salad mix. But the reality is the demand for salad mix, is not $1,000 a week at the market.
Yeah. And just the price of things sometimes too is mind boggling. Like we just bought a fridge we're sort of slowly opening up a farm store, and it was $4,000. And I was just like,
oh my word.
I was just like, wow, that's okay. And I mean, we wanted a nice one that was going to last us. So it was an investment we were willing to make. But sometimes those things you just like wrapping your brain around some of the costs of building up a farm in a proper way, like and not necessarily in like a bootleg way that we all start out doing. But as you start to invest more, just it's the expenses are wild and it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I sometimes laugh when I look back. So like, it's a $4,000 expense. But in your very first year, Jesse, how many times was $4,000 like your yearly expense for something? That was how much. And now you're like, oh yeah, so we'll spend $4,000 on a fridge.
Right.
it's I find myself all the time. We just put in we used to order some more compost, and it was nothing, right? $2,000 of compost this year. But look back, I'm like, oh, that's how much money we made our first season.
Right. Or those seed orders that I remember our first year, our first seed order was like $300, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's so much money. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, a $300 seed order. Yeah, that's like the order that I forgot to make that I'm making in the middle of the season now. I'm like, oh, right. Shoot, I forgot to order extra Salanova or whatever.
Well, it's kind of funny, especially at market, because we talk all the time. I have a gentleman who works the market with me, and I tell him, he's like, I mean, how's market today? Oh, we had a great day. When I look back at the days in the past, where like a great day back then was a third of that, and a bad day now was a great day 4 years ago.
Yeah. And I feel like that's great because that's like such a story for so many farms that are especially that, have been in that like been around for the 10-ish year range. That like a lot of us started and we would go to market and make like $100 or $200 and we'd be like, that's pretty good market. Yeah. But I mean, that's great. I mean, that's where a lot of people start. And I feel good about like, hopefully this podcast has and will, and as it continues to sort of help that generation of people, like, keep going and keep, refine that and take those wins and also, and just keep building on them.
This is a little off topic on a side note, but was there a year that you found in your farm business that, you know what, we're stable now, we got this? What season, what year was that for y'all?
Well, the funny thing about our farm is that we've moved so many times. It's like always right before we move. So like it would have been 2019. And we felt like that was a really good year. And we felt like, okay, we're like really cruising now. We've got our, like we can see that we're actually making a profit and that, we're paying our employee well and everything is going. We actually had 2 employees that year. One was like watching the kids and freeing up Hannah and everything was going great. And then 2020 hit and we were like, okay, well, we need to reevaluate where we are because we realized like how inaccessible our farm was to customers. So then we changed again. This is like the farm that we're on now is our 5th farm. So we just moved to our 5th farm at the end of 2020. And now we're still, just spewing money because we're rebuilding this new farm. But we feel like market wise and production wise, we're back up to like next year's going to be that year for us on the new farm. So it's like every new farm kind of has that year. But we feel like next year, like with the way the production is and our new clients and everything and the consistency, that next year will be that year for this farm. But it definitely feels like especially those first 2 years, no matter when it is, you're just throwing up money, and it's wild, but we feel good about it. I mean, on the new farm, but I think that it takes generally it's around that 5 to 10 year mark. And sometimes it's a full 10. And I think that's a lot of businesses. I think it's underestimated. We tend to like, I don't know, pocket farming in its own little thing, like it's different from other businesses. But starting a restaurant, starting anything, it's going to take you 5 to 10 years to reach a stable level. For the most part, I mean, certain businesses, there's certainly going to be some different businesses there, but I mean, most of those, like if you listen to, I don't know, the Startup Podcast was a good insight into that. They did a lot of great stuff, and that was several years ago. But how I built this and those, I mean, it's those first 5 or 10 years are just bonkers. And that's no matter what industry you're in. But I think it's particular with farming because the margins are so tight.
Oh, 100%. I didn't get a real paycheck. It took me 10 years to get a real decent paycheck. And decent is not decent is $4.50 an hour. So that's not really decent. But it took me 10 years to kind of pull somewhat of a stipend off the business.
Yeah, and I think it's underestimated or underappreciated how many of the really successful farmers that we all know, are 10 plus years into their business, and have put all that money into the infrastructure and into the build-up phase. That doesn't mean that every farm's going to take 10 years. I mean, some farms are going to be faster, especially if you have a good team, and you have people that are really knowledgeable and they get a good start. But I think, it can take a while.
Yeah, and in my own experience too, especially since we started it, the very boot started with the $2,000, in a backyard, that once we had, enough working capital to basically keep growing, that's when we saw real growth. That's when we want something, we go buy it and not think twice about it.
Yeah.
More plastic for something. It's like, I gotta wait 3 weeks until I get paid for this. But now we're fine. Anything I want, just order and get it. But when we couldn't do that, growth was so much slower.
Yeah. I feel like it's when you can do that, when you can make it through your first winter without freaking out and selling your CSA early. And those are the sort of moments that you're like, oh, okay, we're good. Like, we're making it. And this is possible.
Yeah. And I feel like for me, when I was finally able to not work a winter job, or when I was able to go on the farm full time, which has been the last 5 years, but then I've been off the farm. I've been on farm in the winter for the last 2 seasons now. When I was able to step off, was able to stay on the farm for the winter, I was like, okay, now we kind of made it. We've gotten to it's allowing me just to focus on one thing all year round.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Alex, this has been great. I look forward to hearing your interviews and also letting the audience slowly learn more about you and your farming. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for doing these interviews and for coming on and chatting with me today.
Oh, Jack, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to folks and just to learn some more, we'll see where it goes.
Awesome. All right. I hope you enjoyed that. You can follow Alex's work at Old City Acres on Instagram and all the places. We will put links in the show notes, and we will be back here on Monday, bright and early, for Alex's first interview. So make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you are getting it. Pre-order a No-Till Growers hat at notillgrowers.com or snag a copy of the Living Soil Handbook. Also, while I have you, we just started a new forum over at notillgrowers.com. And if you're like Jesse, seriously, who does forums in 2022? Well, we do forums in 2022. And here's the idea. We want to really remake the idea of a forum entirely. When forums were big, we didn't really have the technology we have today to really flesh them out with videos and photos. So with that in mind, our forum not only has those options, but soon we'll have forum exclusive content with said videos and photos to help guide you through everything from starting a garden to microscopy and beyond. Plus, this forum is populated by professional growers like myself, like my partner at notillgrowers.com, Jackson Roulette, like others in the No-Till Growers family and beyond, who are able to answer your questions. Go there to discuss masterclass options or tools, or look for employment or employees, or ask crop or soil specific questions. Like everything that we do, it's free. So I hope to see you there. Link is in the show notes. Otherwise, what do you say we just meet back here on Monday for Alex's first episode? Cool? Cool. See you then.